Hello and welcome to Coffee and Catholics, a Catholic women's talk show podcast. I'm Stacy, one of your hosts, and with me I have...
Hi, I'm Alicia.
I'm Annie.
And I'm Lauren.
Hello and welcome to Coffee and Catholics. This week we're going to be discussing letting Jesus take over during Advent.
We've just been thinking about all the things that Catholic moms are supposed to do during Advent, all the things that we're supposed to be in general outside of Advent, and as Catholic wives, as Catholic mothers, and all of that is such a beautiful mandate from God. All of it is this gift, this mission from God, but it can feel, especially during Advent, like a lot. And like 100 new ways to fail. So Jen Fullwater said that in one of her stand-up. That was really funny to me. She was like, oh no, being Catholic just gave me a bunch of other ways to fail, especially during Christmas. So, but we were just thinking about that and about something that I'm reading this book for Advent. It's a retreat with Jessica Powers, Loving a Passionate God. And Jessica Powers is a Carmelite nun and a poet, prolific poet. And I encourage you to read her poetry and seek it out because it is beautiful, especially for Advent and Lent. But that's what I've been kind of sitting with Advent or during Advent and thinking through and praying through. And it's basically a retreat with her poetry. So this poem is by Jessica Powers, as I mentioned, and it is called The Mercy of God. I'm copying down in a book from my heart's archives the day that I ceased to fear God with a shadowy fear. Would you name it the day that I measured my column of virtue and sighted through windows of merit a crown that was near? Ah, no, it was rather the day I began to see truly that I come forth from nothing and ever toward nothingness tend, that the works of my hands are a foolishness wrought in the presence of the worthiest King, in a kingdom that shall never end. I rose up from the acres of self that I tended with passion and defended with flurries of pride. I walked out of myself and went into the woods of God's mercy, and here I abide. There is greenness and calmness and coolness, a soft leafy covering from the judgment of the sun overhead, and the hush of his peace and the moss of his mercy to tread. I have naught but my will seeking God, even love burning in me as a fragment of the infinite loving and never my own. And I fear God no more. I go forward to wander forever in a wilderness made of his infinite mercy alone. So I was thinking about that poem and just about the ways that I was especially convicted about these acres of self that I tend with passion and defend with flurries of pride. You know, I think about all my efforts, right? All the things I work really hard to cultivate, that my teaching, my work, my mentoring, my motherhood. These are things that I've poured hours and prayers and large sections of my life into. And I'm tending them very, very vigorously sometimes, you know, to make sure that they turn out the way they should and reflect my good hard work. And so I was super convicted about, you know, that part of it. But it was also about this kind of the juxtapositioning of the fear of God with shadowy fear that I thought was really interesting, because we do need to fear God. We need to order our lives according to justice, which is what fear of God is placing ourselves underneath his authority, and as we should, as is just, and assenting to him and surrendering to him. That is what fear of God is. It's wisdom. But the fear of God that this poet is talking about is not that kind of fear. It's the fear of, you know, not being good enough. The fear of making sure that you look a certain way, or that you have it all kind of cleaned up and tended up before, you know, you let him see your work in this garden that he gave you to tend. And that was really also very convicting to me. I'm like, well, hold on, God. I don't want you to see how I've been performing, you know, unless it looks really good. But I was just thinking about all the ways that I have failed and am currently failing in almost every role he gives me every day. And And I just thought we would talk about that tonight, maybe. What that feels like for us and what that looks like and how to invite him into that space of just feeling at your lowest. So I thought that would be something that we could talk about tonight, about what does it look like? How does he come into that? Where does he go? How does he enter into our darkness?
Mm-hmm. Well, and you're talking about this type of fear. Another type that is is the fear of surrendering, of letting him take control, because we want to be in control, because if we're not in control, then we don't know what's going to happen. When really we don't know what's going to happen, even if we are in control. But there's that fear of letting go too. So I think that's part of, she said cultivating with the flurries of pride. Is that?
Yeah, well, she said, the acres of self that we tend and defend with flurries of pride. And then she says, I walked out of myself and went into the woods of God's mercy, and here I abide. So there's that point where we're just like, nope.
Yeah.
I'm done trying to do this on my own. But God can come into that. And Stacy was telling me about how that works when she was talking about the Jesse tree with her kids. I thought it was so beautiful what you were saying.
Yeah, I was they weren't paying attention.
Oh, well,
and I got a little frustrated, and I stopped and I was like, why do I read these stories to you every year? And my older kids kind of had some answers, but they're also kind of quiet because they're teenagers, and they're like, okay, here we go again. But we got talking about it, and I was like, I read these to you because here we have this family tree, Jesus's family tree, like going all the way back. And, and right now in Advent, we talk a lot about Mary's yes, and how, her fiat, and how she gave consent for these things to happen to her so that Jesus could come and save us. But also, looking back through his history, a lot of his ancestors also said yes, but then they would fall, and then they would say yes, and they would fall, and then because they thought they could do it better, or they wanted something and it wasn't what God wanted for them, and they decided that what they wanted was better than what God wanted. And so we see this a lot of this ebb and flow of doing God's will and then falling back. And I told my kids that my job in telling them these stories is for them to understand as they get older that no matter how lonely they feel, how not enough they feel, how sad they get, as like life is not always joyful feeling. And I said, my job is to help through these stories is to help them to remember that they can always turn to God, even in their lowest, even when they feel like they're mad at God, that they can still turn to him. And that's really hard. And I told them that's where it's hard, where you are at a very low point and you're mad that God is allowing these things to happen. And you don't know why, because we never know why. A lot of times, in hindsight, I could look back at my life over the past 35 years and go, oh, I see what God did with this. And I could see what God did with this. And I can see these beautiful things that came out of these very difficult times. That God didn't cause difficult times, but he brought out beautiful things from them. And we were talking about Joseph and how he was sold into slavery from his brothers. And his brothers sold him. He was a slave. He went from that to being imprisoned. And then God was able to use that for something good in the end, where he was able to save his father and brothers from a famine. And he became like the second powerful guy in Egypt at the time. And so even at our lowest, we should always turn to God, even when we feel like, think about Job. I mean, Job's not on the Jesse tree, but always turning back to God. He had a lot of things that he could have been mad about and said, okay, forget you, God, but he didn't. And so I told them that that's why we read these stories, to see these people say yes and see how they fall and to see how God still brought Jesus through this whole brokenness of this family tree. And that he could do that in our individual lives too. Because how many times do we feel like we are spot on? We're doing all the Catholic things. We're doing everything great. Or we're catechizing our family beautifully. And then something happens in our life. Whether it can be financial, or there's a death in the family, or there's just things happen. And we feel, and all these things that were going great just come crashing down, and we feel horrible about it. But if we turn to God, there's hope in the end. So it's holding on to hope, really. And I think that's a big thing. And that doesn't mean that's going to fix everything in the moment, obviously. But I think we can't lose sight of that. Like we can't, like Lauren was saying, and the poem was saying, at some point you just have to say, okay, I give it all to you. I surrender, because I'm trying to do it on my own and it's not working out. But with you, even if I'm a little upset with you right now, it will still be better than if I try to do it on my own.
Yeah. I think that was kind of the reality, that the realization that hit me today. And now, it's not like he hasn't told me this before 100 times, but it just hits different, like when, depending on what's going on. But I think I just, in my mind, when I was reading this poem today, well, first of all, I noticed that she said I walked out of myself. She didn't say I stopped sinning. She didn't say all of a sudden I just didn't sin anymore. She said, I walked out of myself and went into the woods of God's mercy. And here is where I abide. There's greenness and calmness and coolness and a soft leafy covering. So she's saying, I didn't change anything except where I abide, where I seek myself, where I rest. I was resting in my power and my efforts before. I was resting in my cultivation. I was resting in all the things I was doing or not doing. That was where I was abiding there, but here now I'm just abiding in mercy. And she didn't say, I'm not sinning anymore. She just said it's the hush of his peace now, and instead of the judgment that's now kind of covering me, right? So that's that leafy covering that she talks about. It's beautiful imagery there. And I thought to myself, I am never going to be the mother that I want to be. And I actually even said it out loud to myself. I said, I will never be the mother that I want to be. I will never be the wife that I want to be. That's never going to happen. Like, that realization was so huge for me. But then just immediately after that, it was like, even if I could, right? Like, even if I could be the kind of, or even get close, right? Get in the ballpark of the kind of person or the mother or the wife that I wanted to be, it would never ever be as impactful, as eternal, as anointed as my nothingness is next to Jesus when I give it to him and when we do it together. Like, that will change the world. And I feel like, and I said this to Stacy, I feel like there's someone tonight who's listening to this who is at their lowest point, right? They've pretty much failed about everything. They've failed everything. They're in active sin, active addiction. I don't know what it is, but there's someone who feels like there is absolutely nothing that I can do now. God cannot, there's nothing I can give him. I have nothing. I have ruined everything. I have made a mess. And I am telling you, give him the nothingness. Give him the nothing and walk out of yourself. Don't worry about the sin. He will take care of that. He will take care of that stuff when you give it to him. And I kept thinking about how that's me a lot of times, where I'm just sort of never able to measure up to my own standards, not able to measure up to God's standards. That's why Jesus is here. And so I just felt like, especially during Advent, the nothing is what this is,
And that was something else I told my kids. I was like, I can't make those choices for you, and I can't force you to make the choices, especially when you're older and that's where you're really going to have to use these things. I said, but these stories that I give you every Advent, these are the tools that will help you remember that you can choose to turn back to him. Mm-hmm. So if you're in your lowest, like Lauren's talking about, and yeah, and I was definitely there this time last year. Mm-hmm. It was really a very low point for me. But if you have those tools, we have those tools. We have prayer, and we have the Bible, and they help us turn back to him. They don't fix our problems. Like Lauren said, you don't worry about the sin or the situation that you're in. Dragging, but just the first choice is to turn back towards God.
Just get up and walk out of there.
And then you let him guide you where you need to go. And that could be all sorts of places, from counseling to whatever. And
sometimes it's just in our minds. Yeah. It's a place we need to leave in our hearts.
Right.
There's this place of condemnation, or there's this place of emptiness that we've been abiding in, and it's covering us. And what she's saying is, I'm gonna leave from this place mentally and go to another place inside of my heart, where there's greenness and there's softness and there's mercy, where he's there. Green, it has been a thing for me. Like, if you were sitting here, you would see my table right now. We're doing a very like leafy kind of greeny orange Christmas kind of theme in our house, because it's just kind of where I'm at right now. So it's all just interesting how it all adds up. So yeah, I just want to say to you, all of you listeners who are listening and who are hurting, that I've been there, we've been there, and get up out of that place. Get up out of that place of self-flagellation, out of that place of condemnation, and come into the green. Please come with us into the green of Jesus' love and nothingness, and give that nothingness to him. And he will make of it Rahab, David, he will make of it a lineage for himself. So I just want to speak that word over whoever's listening tonight, that come out of there, come out of that dark place. You are enough. With him, everything is enough.
And I don't remember, and maybe you can't get out, but you can let him in. I don't remember if it was a quote or part of the Hallows 25 days of prayer for Advent. It was somewhere around there, but it's been resonating with me. Is Jesus says, allow me into the mess. So if you can't get out of the mess, at least let him in. Once you allow him in, maybe that will help you get into that beautiful forest of his mercy. And I don't know, every time Lauren has read that part of that poem tonight, it's just like, there's just like this feeling in my soul. It just goes like, I don't know, almost like a release. Yeah,
you go into you can breathe.
Yeah.
When you go into the green, you can breathe. Because there's trees there, and there's oxygen, and there's, cover, and it's cool. And yeah, and again, poetry should be read out loud. Like, poetry should be a part of Advent. It should be a part of everything, if you ask me, but I'm a little biased. But it should be read out loud. It should be read over and over again, because those words are instructive to us, especially poetry that's written by saints and doctors, because they are teaching us through these things. So try to find some poetry, and I can link some to help you. Maybe you need that rhythm to come out. Maybe you need to hear those words soak into you to help you release those things. So if that ministered to you tonight, listening to that, seek that out.
And I will say, now that you mentioned that, a priest many years ago, he was like, you're such an artist. He's saying this to me. He goes, start with reading the Psalms. So, which is, poetry and song. And so, if you're looking for somewhere simple, and you probably have a Bible at home, or that's a good place to start. And then of course Lauren has wonderful suggestions.
We can link some. There's the poetry of Jessica Powers for sure. There's a book called Waiting on the Word, Malcolm Pete.
That's a good one.
It's for Advent poems. There's so many beautiful thematic. John of the Cross, the romances of John of the Cross, is a very easy, accessible poem, actually. Those are resources. There's another book I'd love to share with. It's called Reclaiming Quiet, and I did this one last year for Advent. Cultivating a Life of Holy Attention. It's a new book, came out last year. Sarah Clarkson. Some of you are familiar with the Clarkson family. She wrote it, the oldest daughter, and it is incredibly powerful. The entire book feels like some sort of poem. It's so lyrical and melodic, and that's just her style. Really challenging, though. Really beautiful and very soft. If you're in a spot where you just can't really do much more, and you're walking with a limp, and you're in pain emotionally, and you have nothing to give, give that and read Reclaiming Quiet, because that one is just beautiful.
So this Advent, remember to let Jesus into the mess and let him guide you into the force of his mercy.
And as always, thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Join us again in about 2 weeks.
Until then, may God bless you and may Mary accompany you.
Coffee and Catholics is a proud partner of the SmartCatholics Podcast Network. Find new shows to love, meet like-minded Catholics, and join the community at smartcatholics.com.